It's time. I recently reached the unbelievable milestone of 1,000 subscribers. So today, we're going to tackle the largest model in my pile of shame, and a source of personal shame that I've held on to for a very long time. This is the Dread Saurian, a Forge World model for the Lizardmen released in 2014 and then later available for the Seraphon faction after the death of Warhammer Fantasy, RIP. I mean, look at the size of this guy's foot compared to a regular Saurus warrior. It's massive. I got this absolute unit a couple of years ago, back when my disposable income was a lot better than it is now. It arrived, I cut off the enormous Forge World sprue gates, did a bit of minor cleanup, and then put it in a box and told myself that one day I would sit down and finish it. And that day never came. I understand it. In terms of miniature painting, we might want to save a project until our skills have improved so we can do the project justice, but I know and you know that we're actually a lot better than we give ourselves credit for. And that brings us to today. We're going to build a giant dinosaur because that's the good stuff. I started by laying everything out and making sure that no pieces have got lost, and doing some more size comparisons because I still cannot get over how big this model is. I mean, look at that enormous body, which is just one big, enormous bit of resin.
Nice.
After this, I make sure every piece gets a good scrub in some warm soapy water. If you've never worked with Forge World models before, or just resin in general, it's extremely important to give resin pieces a good clean. They use a particular mold release agent which helps the resin not stick to the mold, but it also makes paint and glue hard to stick to as well. So a quick scrub will remove any shiny bits on the outside. Now a model this size needs a bit more support than just super glue, so I've got my pin vise, some 3mm brass rod, and a shiny new handsaw from Amazon to cut the rod down. One of these will betray me. I also grab a dust mask because resin dust is extremely not good for my lungs, and I'm not interested in speedrunning cancer anytime soon. I then measured out 1 inch increments on the brass rod and got ready to start cutting with my shiny new hacksaw, which did not work. I tried for ages and we didn't even cut halfway through the rod before the saw blade dulled immediately, despite the fact it says on the packaging that it cuts through wood, PVC and steel? Oh, for fuck. After I borrowed a far superior hacksaw and cut the brass rod into 1 inch pieces, I had the genius idea to put some tape on my pin vise drill, 1/2 inch down. This way, I can drill 1/2 inch into one part, 1/2 inch into another part, and my brass rod will fit perfectly. I used my hobby knife to make a small dent in the first leg before drilling into it with my pin vise. I made sure to check against the main body of the Dread Saurian before using a trick I've seen a few people use before. Basically, you get some blue tack, or poster tack for all my American friends out there. You stick it to the body here, and then you stick the leg on. The blue tack sticks to the body, and you get a little bump where the hole on the leg was, showing you accurately where to drill the next hole. This kind of worked, but it took a few tries to stop the blue tack from just sticking to the leg in the newly drilled hole. Once it did work, I got my knife and made an indent in the body and got to drilling a hole. I checked the leg a few times against the body just to make sure the angle I was drilling was correct, because that was my next concern. I didn't really know if the angle I was drilling was correct. On top of this, a 1 inch piece of brass rod was way too big, and I had to cut smaller pieces of brass rod, which obviously made the tape on the drill bit from earlier completely pointless. It was at this point I grabbed my other Amazon purchase, some thick super glue, which also betrayed me. Look, I've used Gorilla Glue before, so I don't blame the brand for this. It was just another annoying setback. The glue had pretty much set in the bottle and was just a thick, congealed blob that wasn't budging no matter how hard I squeezed the bottle. It was just stuck to the side, and as you can see, it definitely didn't make me want to throw the entire project in the bin. So I used my standard go-to super glue, which was fine. I'd originally thought it would have been too thin, but it was absolutely fine. I repeated this process for the other two legs that would be on the floor, and therefore holding up the entire weight of the body, making sure to check the angle of the hole I was drilling, but I'm not going to lie to you team, I was just guessing the entire time and hoping it worked out because I had no idea what I was doing. I think for the most part it kind of worked, but there were some horrendous gaps between the legs and the body, and when I set it down to make sure it stood up, it was so wobbly. I did attempt to fix this, but this would have put the legs completely out of place, and I figured it would be much easier to fix the wobbliness of the model than it was to, try and fix these gaps. After this, I was getting kind of sick of trying to pin things together, and I came to the conclusion the fourth leg wasn't taking any weight, so it didn't need to be pinned. And as long as I didn't pick the model up by the tail, this did not need to be pinned either. I decided to call it a day here before some other non-sentient hobby supply decided to betray me. The next day, I woke up with renewed vigour. I was going to finish building this son of a gun, even if it killed me. I mean, maybe not that far, but you catch my drift. Just like with the load-bearing legs, I decided to pin the head onto the body. The lower jaw didn't need to be pinned, and I really couldn't be bothered to make sure the lower and upper jaw lined up perfectly with the pins and everything else. So, just the main head. Drill a hole. Use the blue tack method. And then make little bits of progress to make sure the angles are correct before firstly gluing the lower jaw to the main head, then gluing both onto the body. Again, there were massive gaps, but at the time, that seemed like a future Connor problem. There was also this collar / crown thing that I needed to sort out. It didn't really go together properly. I think when I was cutting off the enormous resin gates many years ago, I might have cut off some important bits to glue this together. So once again, I got out my trusty 3mm brass rod, guessed a good length, and put it to the side, as it was probably going to be the last thing I attached to the model. There was also this dorsal spine that needed to be attached, but it seemed like it wasn't really in line with the others, so I dunked it some very hot water and carefully bent it a little. You'll see when I attach it later that it seems a bit more in line with the other dorsal spines. After that, I stick on the much smaller bits, the tail spikes and the Dread Saurians. I think these would be classed as dew claws. They were pretty simple steps, I don't need to go into them too much. Then we stick on the nose horn, face horn, primary nasal keratinous growth, and we glue down the face armour as well as the side armour. Now we're going to go back to this crown / collar thing, and you can see here I've drilled a little into each part on both sides. I'm going to connect these together with some brass rod. I'll leave some brass rod visible because when it's painted, it will just look like part of the model. Last bits to attach were of course the tongue and the newly bent into place dorsal spine, and you can see it does look a little bit more in line with other spines. This guy is an absolute monster and so hard to pick up, but now, future Connor here, we need to have a look at these gaps. I'm not going to sit here and shit on Forge World models because I don't want to become a negative Games Workshop kicked my dog channel. There are so many of them out there, and if you want that, good for you. That's not me. I just want to have a nice positive channel. But yes, there are some very glaring gaps that need to be addressed, especially around the legs and where the jaws met the body. I tried to start with some green stuff, a 2-part epoxy putty. It will stick to anything and everything. So I make sure I've got a pot of water nearby to wet the cutting mat, my fingers and my tools. Also, if you get the green stuff that's connected together like this one, be sure to cut out the middle bit. This is because the 2 parts have already touched, so they've already started curing, which means it will be absolutely no good for filling in gaps or sculpting. When you mix the blue and yellow parts together, you will get the aptly named green stuff. So I rolled a small wormy dealie of green stuff and just started absolutely smashing it into the gap. I don't know what I'm doing. This is potentially the first time I've done something like this on a model of this scale. My hope here is that I don't do a good job. I do a good enough job. This project has completely broken me. I didn't realise what I was getting myself in for, and I didn't realise I would happen upon so many pitfalls and boundaries. But the horrors persist, and so do I. Eventually, by some absolute miracle, I have something that looks alright. I'll only really know when the model is primed, but again, that's future Connor problem, so good luck to that guy. I also attempted to gap fill with green stuff on the legs, but I just couldn't do it. In my time of sorrow, anguish and torment, an absolute genius idea filled my mind. If I can't fill the gap, can I hide it? I ran to my local hobby store. I picked up some string and I picked up a pot of super glue with a brush applicator. We'll talk about these later. Most importantly, I went to my local supermarché and picked up some bicarbonate of soda. I searched online. I came across an old tome by none other than Luke from Luke's APS / Luke from Geek Gaming. And he told me you can fill gaps with super glue and bicarbonate of soda. And by the gods was he right. I fixed some gaps using this method, mainly for structural support. No one was going to see these armpit gaps once the big boys put on the base. Then I got out my string. I cut off a random amount, super glued one end to the leg, just around the same place the hideous green stuffing was, and I began to wrap. I figured string this size would look appropriately sized rope on the legs. Perhaps rope that skinks could climb up, or a warrior could attach future adornments to. I couldn't care. I convinced myself I could make a story out of the string. Anything to cover the gaps and anything to get me away from trying to fill these gaps in with green stuff. I used the super glue and brush to hold it all in place and make it hard and sturdy. honestly, I am a goddamn genius. I think it looks great. Yes, at the minute, he does look like a middle-aged man doing his 8th marathon, but once it's all painted, the string will blend in with the other adornments and charms. So, let's have some glamour shots. Thank you so much for joining me on this slightly more unhinged episode of the Hobby Heap. I cannot believe 1,000 people have decided to subscribe to my channel and join me on my journey. It honestly means the absolute world to me. Life is crazy busy and my mental health also means motivation is poor, so my uploads are incredibly sporadic. And still, you guys always stick around and wait for new videos to appear, and I can't tell you how much that means to me. I'm going to give this project a small break. I do want to get it painted and finished soon, but I need your help. I have absolutely no idea how to paint this thing. Should I stick with a Monster Hunter theme? Should I paint it like another massive dinosaur or monster or dragon from TV or film or video games? Let me know in the comments down below. I've already asked the Seraphon subreddit and I've got some brilliant suggestions, but please keep them coming. If you haven't already done so, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Every bit of support means the absolute world to me. Thank you for watching. My name is Connor. This is the Hobby Heap. Be good to each other. Be kind to yourselves. I need to go lie down. I'll see you next time, you bloody beauties.